two friends, one mic, and a mission to unpack complex socio-political issues through an Islamic lens.
From death to feminism.
From mental health to disabilities.
These topics are often stigmatized or approached with an extreme lens. Older generations impose conservative culture on religion, and newer generations impose a liberal culture on religion. So where's the balance?
We're two best friends who created Noor and Nurture to change just that. I'm Faria.
I'm Hera, and together we're creating space for these honest, sometimes uncomfortable, but deeply necessary conversations that our communities need.
Here, we explore Islamic topics that are often stigmatized, misunderstood, or avoided.
With compassion, reflection, and curiosity, not judgment.
And with the goal of starting a dialogue so we can grow and learn together.
If you're someone who's introspective, questioning, or simply craving a more open and loving relationship with your deen and self, then assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Noor and Nurture.
Follow Noor and Nurture on socials. Wherever you're listening from, let's journey inward together. Salaam alaikum.
So this is our very first episode in our 3-part series, and we're so excited to have you guys because it's a really heavy but amazing topic.
Yeah, when Hera and I were discussing what we wanted our first series to be, we both decided that it would be really important for us to discuss death because it has such a significant role both in Islam and in our lives.
It's also something that not a lot of people like to think about or talk about. So we want to talk about it in a way where it's a little bit easier to digest, but also frame it into why it's important to think about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And hopefully, through this series and through other efforts, we as a community can cultivate a more positive response to death and get more dialogue about it. Because in Islam, there's such an important emphasis on not being afraid of death, but more like preparing for it.
So just to give you a quick framework, today's episode will be all about the actual travel and journey and importance of death itself. Then the next episode, we'll talk about end-of-life recommendations in the Islamic perspective. And we'll end the series talking about grief and loss and discussing all the challenges and important aspects of that.
So let's just kick off with discussing what death is and why it's so significant in Islam. Something that I think is really interesting is that every single religion, spirituality, atheist, they all cannot deny that we all experience death. It's like the one commonality between every single human on earth, and it's something that we're all going to experience. So not only is it an experience that is going to be experienced worldly, but also it has such an important emphasis in Islam as well.
It's not nothingness. Death is not something that is nothing. It is a breakage between the link of the soul and the physical body, with the barrier that was created in between it. So just so we have a clear definition of what the actual act is.
Yeah. One thing that I find really interesting is when I was a young child, I was only used to seeing graveyards for Christians or your typical American graveyard. And it was flat, beautiful green grass with beautiful flowers on top. And it was, you couldn't even tell there was a body underneath, right? And then I finally saw a Muslim grave. And it was a stark difference. It was you could see the mound showing there's a shape of a body underneath, right? And it was just very, very raw. It wasn't like that beautiful, picturesque graveyard that I had seen for Americans. And that was so important to me because I realized that, death is a very real thing that we're all going to have to experience, but we cannot go on this facade and not really be able to think about preparing for death or what we're going to go through and actually have a positive relationship with the idea of dying.
Yeah. All in all, this is just one big test that we're preparing for. And we have the cheat sheet, you guys. This is the cheat sheet, and we want to give you the cheat sheet.
Exactly. So I would love to share a little bit of narrative on death in general. So I'm one of those people that when I started deep diving into Islam, one of the things that stood out the most to me was removing the emphasis that I have on this life and this world. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, that was such a good thing for me because it relieved my heart from the slavery and chains of so many things in this life, right? And it helps me get through a lot of calamities. For instance, if my health is not doing well, I had this moment where I was crying and I was sad, but I was oh wait, this isn't even the life that matters, right? And that helped me get through these things. But I realized, you mentioned, spiritually, I'm at a place where I understand that death might be painful, but I'm not afraid of it. I'm constantly thinking about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, because of that, as you know, being my friend, I bring up death quite a bit.
Yeah. One of our favorite topics, you guys.
It's impossible to be a Muslim who truly understands what it means to be a Muslim without constantly thinking about death, because that is what's between us and meeting our Lord, our Creator, and going on to the life that matters the most.
And I think remembering death every day, or as much as you can, grounds you. So this isn't to say that this life doesn't matter, so don't do anything you enjoy, don't work hard, don't like enjoy your luxuries or the blessings you have. That's literally not what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say is that there's a balance, but there's something that has to ground you every single day. And if it's not like something as simple as namaz, like something like one thing that we're required to do, death will help kind of give you that big picture of like, okay, today, what am I doing that's going to ground me, because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
On our first episode, we discussed death and its process. So today is going to be a little bit of a different kind of episode. We're going to be discussing end-of-life care within an Islamic perspective. So we're actually really lucky today because we have Hera with us, who is a board-certified physician within hospice and palliative care. So this is actually a really important topic because there's not a lot of discourse around of end-of-life care, right?
Yeah, especially in Islam, a lot of Muslim patients I get really don't even know how to start a conversation about this. It is so stigmatized and so emotionally difficult. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about, because death is something that should be very natural for us to talk about.
Right.
And Islam promotes us to think about and talk about death.
It's not just in the Muslim community, but for everyone, it's really difficult. Like, we think there's only life or death, and we often don't think about, God forbid, getting into an experience or situation where we are disabled, or, you know, we do need some kind of treatment for that. And a lot of times we're unprepared for these things, or like even being able to have these really tough discussions, like with our families and with ourselves on what we would do, because it ends up putting you in such a dark place because no one wants to think about that. But like, kind of like we discussed in our previous episode, it's so important to understand that death is a reality that we're all going to go through. And it's better to be prepared for it rather than be surprised by it.
Yeah, 100%. And dying is something that he has wanted for all of us. We can't decide when a person dies, but we can make that transition as comfortable as we can because we have the means to do that.
As we're listening to this, like, preparation is so important, especially as a Muslim, right? Like, as a Muslim, if you're going to Umrah or you're going to Hajj, it's actually mandated for you to have a will. And we need to start discussing having these end of life and advanced directives filled out as well. So let's just jump into it. I want to hear your humanized approach. What is the fatwa? What are the rulings? Tell us all about it.
Okay. So just to start with, I think the way we need to always frame decision making around something as huge as end of life care is, what is our purpose? Right? Our purpose here is to worship and to submit. And if we ever lose that ability and we can't gain it back, that helps guide whether continuing certain medical treatments, prolonging a dying process, if that's valuable or not.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And
I've never thought about it like that.
And that's how we have to think about it, because what's the point of living if we can't pray, if we can't make dua, if we can't be a community with each other?
Oftentimes we're probably just harming people and keeping them here longer for our own satisfaction because of our own nafs and desire to have that person in our lives.
And that's a huge thing to keep in mind is, are you doing this for yourself, or are you doing this for that loved one, and trusting that Allah's going to take care of them?
Wow.
We rely on like the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Hadith. And that's what the Islamic fiqh councils have done to kind of create some of these guidelines. It's not permitted. So biggest thing is, it's not permitted to end a life. Always keeping that in mind. And also to understand what that means when it comes to things like withdrawal of care. So not starting something like dialysis, or not starting an aggressive measure like CPR, or being put on breathing machines. To say, no, I'm not going to do that, does not mean you are killing that person. And I think that's a huge stigma people think is, if I have the ability to push care, I have to do it. Otherwise, I'm going to kill my loved one. And we have to remember, there was a time where we did not have these measures.
Right.
When it comes to different levels of consciousness. So this means like brain damage, just different levels of brain damage and things like that. If a person cannot live a normal life, you need 3 specialists to deem this patient in a vegetative or irreversible state, and then you can withdraw. But you would need, Islamically, you need 3. So usually what I say is like, usually it's like the neurocritical care doctor, the neurologist, and a palliative care doctor, and boom.
Okay,
and then speaking of advanced directives, so there is a fatwa, it's number 12086, and it was back in 1989 that they created this fatwa. And this is a formal ruling or interpretation, just for anybody who doesn't know what a fatwa is, based off Islamic law, that like a mufti, who's like a legal scholar, deems is okay for us to live by. And the second part of this fatwa I want to emphasize, because I wish this is something that we can live by here in America, but we can't. But it specifically says the family member's opinion is not included in decision making, as they are unqualified to make these decisions.
I think, like this all being said, I do want to acknowledge that we are human beings, and there is like a humanized approach to this, right? Like there's, we do have an emphasis on fiqh and hearing the fatwa, but like we do understand that these are really difficult decisions, and there should be a bit of a humanized approach, right? Because sometimes it falls on the head of like one family member, and they have to decide whether their father or their mother is going to live or die, and that is a lot to put on someone's shoulders. Like I understand that. So like I understand that there's rulings and that there's a lot of emotions involved too, but I think the best part about this is that we're Muslims, right? So praying istikhara or asking Allah for guidance, praying tahajjud to help us through these decisions. And then, you know, death is not the end for us.
Amazing.
Yes.
Love it.
All right, so let's jump in with this ayah. And and we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and a loss of wealth and lives and fruit, and give good tidings to the patient, who when disaster strikes them say, indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to him we will return. Those are the ones upon who are blessings from their Lord and mercy, and it is those who are rightly guided. I think to like really comprehend what this says, I think we have to dive into like what it feels to go through one of these things, right?
I feel like when it comes to things where you're forced to learn sabr and patience, Allah tells us that we have to go through these things. Like we're not promised ease in this life at all.
Right.
And to expect it is kind of silly, I want to say, just because it's not told to any of us that this is something that's granted to us in this life. It was really hard to learn patience, and I kind of didn't understand why things were happening the way that they were happening. And I think it was only up until I understood like the journey of the soul and why some people also suffer at the end of their life. For me, for example, I just feel like I've had a lot of loss in my life from when I think I was like a teenager. Allah will do whatever he needs to make sure that we ensure Jannah.
Right.
That is ensured for us. Like, I don't think anything put more peace in my heart that like Allah for sure wants Jannah for each and every one of us. Like he will do whatever. The way it had to happen was the way it had to happen. And I now accept that like several years later.
Right.
So I feel like when you learn more, that patience kind of comes naturally with understanding why certain things happen the way that they did.
Right.
And also realizing like Allah doesn't do things that we can't bear. He doesn't do things that are unfair, even though if it seems unfair.
And I think it's so important to talk about like the main aspects of what Islam teaches us. Like something that I think is so beautiful is that Allah calls us his slaves. And, you know, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who has the highest station with Allah, he calls him his slave. And so you kind of have to question, like, typically we have a very derogatory context with slave, but the truth is that we are a slave of one thing or the other, and we have to decide what we're going to be a slave of, right? And I think that's what Islam is all about. Like we have this dunya, and there could be many things that shackle us, right? It could be loving other people, you know, it could be money, it could be status, it could be so many things. And Allah wants us to break those chains and free us and say, be a slave of mine, where he is such a just God for us, right? Like he takes care of us, he's compassionate, he's merciful. It's everything that I would want someone that I am a slave to versus like this life. And I think even like tying it back to this ayah and what you're talking about is like loving other people and not being able to accept what Allah's, you know, testing us with, or that they've moved on to the next phase because that was the best time for them. That is a form of slavery and attachment to this dunya. Like we have to be in acceptance of Allah. But that all being said, we have to give space to like grieving. We can accept it, and it can be incredibly painful for us, and like we will get suffice for the sabr that we choose. But that grief process, like I feel like a lot of people forget that we are still allowed to grieve.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people also forget is crying is what Allah gave us as a form of release.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing to be able to have such a soft heart that we're so in tune with our emotions that we need that release.
It kind of reminds me of a quote that I have written down. And it's Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saying this. And he said, "Do you not hear? Allah does not punish for the shedding of tears or grief of the heart." And I think that is just so powerful and beautiful, right? Like, we sometimes don't understand that we can balance it. You can accept Allah's plan, but still grieve and cry. And that doesn't mean you're not accepting of it, or, you're not grateful for it. It just means that you're tragically human. You know, we love so hard, and that's like a part of us. But the most important thing is that we grieve with dignity.
Yes.
I love this topic.
Me too.
I hope you guys all enjoyed it and got some introspection or some tools. As always, we love being able to share our insight with you guys.
Yeah, and inshallah, we hope we connect with all of you, and inshallah we all reunite in Jannah together too, and we all chat about this in person together.
Ameen.
By the waterfall.
Ameen. Thanks for listening, you guys.
We love you guys.
Assalamu alaikum.